Hi there, everybody, and welcome to another adventure in podcasting. This is Words, Images, and Worlds, and I'm delighted to be joined on this episode by author Emily Whitten. I believe author is part of what you do, but I also think there might be some social media work that you do. Somewhere I saw the word influencer attached to your name, I think, or something like that. It might have been your Amazon bio, maybe.
I do have a friend who once called me a pop culture maven, so maybe that's what you're thinking of.
I
I
like it.
threw it into my bio because if someone else says it about you, why not? I do a lot of things in both the genre entertainment industry and generally. In my regular life, I'm an attorney, actually.
Oh,
So
wow,
that
wow.
that is what I do for my 9 to 5. And then in my past, I have worked on and run and founded genre literary or comics related conventions. So
Mm-hmm.
the North American Discworld Convention for Sir Terry Pratchett, a fantasy satirist, is a convention I co-founded. And then I've worked on Comic Cons like Awesome Con and literary conventions like Balticon. And so I've worked in that genre of things. I'm also often a guest on the radio show Fantastic Forum, which is local to the
Mm-hmm.
Arlington, Virginia area, with
Mm-hmm.
Ulysses Campbell as the host. And I, of course, go to conventions now for my books. But for about 7 years, I was an entertainment journalist for Comic Mix. So I wrote about everything to do with comics and creators and interviewed a number of great people and gave my opinions on things and all of that kind of stuff. So these days, I mostly in the entertainment or genre area. Besides enjoying it, go to Comic Cons for to meet fans, promote my books, sell my books, and also moderate or be a guest on panels. Um, and the book series that I go to promote is called The
Mm-hmm.
Underfoot. It
Mm-hmm.
is
Love it.
co-created with thank you.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
co-created with Ben Fisher, my co-writer, and our artist is Michelle Wen. Our letterer is Tom Zoller, and it's currently out with Lion Forge Oni Publishing Group. It originally
Mm-hmm.
came out with Lion Forge and then it was merged, and so now it's Lion Forge Oni. We've got 2 books out, both of them nominated for a Ringo Award for Best Kids Comic or Graphic Novel. And the first one was also nominated for a Black Eyed Susan Book Award by the Maryland Library Association. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what I go out to the conventions with these days.
And they've also been up for Excellence in Graphic Literature Awards with Pop Culture Classroom, I believe. At least the first one has. Is that right?
I don't know.
I think
Maybe we
so.
should check that.
Yeah.
If so, that's great. I actually, we learn about it when people tell us, so that would be cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll say maybe for now because I don't know, but if you think so, we'll go with it.
I served on a juror for that a couple of years, and I think that's how I found my way across Underfoot.
Okay,
So
okay.
I could be wrong. My memory's not perfect. We know this from eyewitness accounts. Since you're an attorney, I'll mention that. But you're welcome to object, of course. But yeah, I think that was the case. I think that's how I found out about Underfoot
Excellent.
initially. So I'm really curious about this sort of drawing that you have to comics and graphic novels, but then you also lead this life as an attorney, which I find the balance of the two fascinating. So how does that work for you, and what drew you to comics and pop culture?
Well, it's interesting because when I was growing up, I didn't really know what I was reading and or watching was, pop culture, comics, genre entertainment related. It was just there. It was something I enjoyed. So when I was very small, I'd watch cartoons like Thundercats or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and I'd be like, oh, this is
Mhm.
fun. My dad would listen to the radio shows for the Green Hornet and the Lone Ranger.
Mhm.
And I have an early memory of watching the Superman movie with him, the original Superman movie with him. And then as I continued on in my childhood, I was very into the X-Men animated series and then the Batman animated series. So both Marvel
Mhm.
and DC.
Mhm.
But I really didn't read comics that much as a child simply because I didn't have any and I didn't know where they were available. My oldest sister had a few Archie digests or Archie and Jughead. And then she had some individual issues of like Richie Rich with Lottie Lot, I think it was, and maybe one or two other like individual comics, but then also like I really liked She-Ra when that was, big the first time around, and that came
Hmm.
with little mini booklet comics that you could read that went with it, which is how I learned that there was actually a male character. I didn't even know at first because he doesn't show up that much at first, and then I was like, oh, there's like one man. But yeah, so and I would watch other cartoons that were related to things that are now comics, but I don't know if they were like at the time, like My Little Pony is now a
Hmm.
comic, but I believe it started as a show. So there's like kind of an intertwining. But I didn't really read comics until I was in law school and was introduced to Deadpool.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, so I read one issue of Deadpool. It was issue number 14. He spends most of the issue as a slightly frozen half corpse in a snowdrift, and all of his peripheral characters talk about him. And it was
Hmm.
so fascinating, just the what they said about him psychologically, that I was like, oh, I have to read more of this. So I, of course, doing everything by small measures, went and bought the entire original run on eBay for about $180, which now is probably worth a little more,
I would
given
say
that
so.
given that most of it's been signed by people like Joe Kelly and Fabian Nicieza and Ed McGuinness and Nathan Massengill and lots of the creators, Jimmy Palmiotti and
Mhm.
Christopher Priest. So and Gail Simone. So I dove into the Deadpool world. But before that, I had always grown up reading sci-fi and fantasy and genre fiction, like reading
Mhm.
prose, and I didn't know that's what it was. I just knew it was on the shelf. My two older sisters had a lot of books. My mother is an English teacher, retired now, who taught advanced placement, but also British literature. So I got really into King Arthur, and then that, of course, included the Chronicles of Prydain, based on the Mabinogi, on the Welsh legend that also is connected to the King Arthur legend. So I have like
Mhm.
20 something books on King Arthur, which I'm sure isn't impressive to other, King Arthur scholars, but for my childhood, it was pretty good.
Oh yeah,
Um,
oh yeah.
and then in college I got into Terry Pratchett because there were a few books, just a few, about five paperbacks of his in the lending library part of the Stacks at Indiana University Bloomington. The Stacks being this giant library with tons and tons of really intellectual books, but also this like small section on the first floor as you walked in where you could just browse for more like fun stuff, I guess.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I didn't browse it that often because I already had a lot of books, but I did go one day and find Soul Music by Terry Pratchett, and I read it and I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. And then I went back and I kept reading them. And by law school, I had gotten up to where he was at that point writing, which was Thud, and that's when I met him and started organizing the convention. So it all kind of intertwined. I started writing a blog called Ask Deadpool, where I would make up questions as Deadpool, or sorry, people would send me questions and I would answer them. I would make up answers as Deadpool. Unofficial. Marvel was aware of it, but unofficial. But I had a good time with that, and then that's how I ended up writing for Comic Mix. Clearly, I was really into at least some comics, and
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
and then I learned about a lot more about comics by talking to creators and reading. What if you go to like the Harveys in the past, now the Ringo Awards at Baltimore Comic Con, you get a bag of books as part of your awards, goodie bag. It's your goodie bag, and so you get new things you might not have heard of, but that are up for an award probably, or very well respected. And then I would go to like the book expo, and so I gathered around me lots of books and comic books that I might
Mhm.
not already have encountered. So it's kind of a building into things. But I love all genres of creation, and I look at comics as and I love all media of creation. I look at comics as a media that's particularly fun for telling stories in certain ways.
Mhm. Mhm. Now you mentioned meeting Terry Pratchett, which that's impressive. Jealous. Other folks along the way that you've met that have been especially kind in the industry?
Oh, so many. First of all, two
Mhm.
weeks after I met Terry, I met Neil Gaiman.
Oh
So,
wow, wow. Now
and
I'm
and
really jealous.
and
Yeah.
we eventually became friends because we just kept seeing each other, and I guess he couldn't get rid of me. No, I'm kidding. But so both of them were incredibly wonderful people, and Neil still is an incredibly wonderful person. Sadly, we lost Terry in 2015.
Mhm.
Um, And you know, and they are both and were both very inspirational generally to people looking to create. And of course, spending time with them was amazing. Is amazing, was amazing, depending. And you know, also like really everybody in the industry. Nathan Massengill suggested, the first person to suggest I go to a Comic-Con. He's one of the he's an inker who worked on Deadpool back in the 90s and many other things, but that's how I knew him. And so he took me along to a Comic-Con and suggested that I go and see what art I liked in Artist Alley and ask them if they'd do little sketch cards for me, because they would often do those for no money to a little money. And
Mhm.
currently I have a number of those little sketch cards that were brilliant hanging in my little gallery that you can't see here, but I have like a gallery wall of all comics art. So that was a great intro. During that, I met people like the sadly now deceased Jeremy Dale. I met John K. Snyder III, who I'm still very good friends with.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
you know, I met so many people through that. And then really part of it early on when I was even before I was writing for Comic Mix, when I went to my first New York Comic Con, I tracked down Riley Brown and probably startled him greatly because I looked for him all day. They'd moved his table or something, so it was
Oh
like nobody
yeah.
knew where he was. I looked for him all day. I only had a few minutes until I had to catch a train back to throw my sister's baby shower the next morning on a Sunday. And so I was only there for one day. I had heavy bags of books. I'm looking all over. I finally find him and I walk up to him, two bags of books in my hand. I'm like, Riley Brown, you were the hardest person in comics to find. And but we're friends now because he's a nice guy. So he
Awesome.
overlooked the fact that I'm crazy. Um not totally crazy. So you know, and through him I met maybe through him other people. I met like Dean Haspiel, amazing creator for many years. It
Hmm.
just, the
Hmm.
list goes on. I just went to Baltimore Comic Con and I just posted my photos of just pictures I had remembered to take with some of the amazing creators I know and love who are now, I'm privileged to call my friends. And I had tagged like over 40 people in the, it was like literally, it was the magic number. I had tagged like 42 people. And that was only the ones I remembered to take pictures with. And that's all like creators or people who have run or are running conventions or people who are involved in the industry. So there are toxic elements to our industry. I don't want to skate over that, but
Hmm.
the whole
Hmm.
experience for me overall has been extremely welcoming. Um, there are also some people in the entertainment industry on like the actor side who I'm friends with now who are wonderful. And you know, I've had so many good experiences.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, just dabbling into that world on this podcast has been really, it's been really nice to meet people because most people do seem to be really nice and willing to talk with you and take some time to share ideas and talk about the world of comics and literature. So, uh, wonderful. I always like to hear about the good stories. And you also have Underfoot, we've mentioned, and so I'm curious about how that collaboration came to be and what it's been like to work on that series.
Yeah, well, I covered a little bit of it by accident, just going through backstory. It was a very winding road because I discovered the Deadpool comics. Then I was doing the Terry Pratchett convention. Then through that, I met Esther Friesner, another wonderful friend who writes fiction in the genre, both short stories and long form fiction in fantasy, sci-fi. And she knew the editors of Comic Mix, Mike Gold and Glenn Howman, and
Hmm.
she knew that I
Hmm.
wrote the Deadpool blog. All of this connects. You see what I mean?
Hmm.
And she said, "Oh, you guys should meet because your stuff is funny. They would like it. They did like it. That's how I ended up writing for them." And then another friend of mine, Kevin Stokes, who's a great artist, comics artist, he said, "Hey, I did the art for this miniseries, the 3-issue miniseries. Would you like to review it for Comic Mix?" And I said, "Sure," because I like his art. And it was by Ben Fisher, who is my co-creator of the
Oh.
Underfoot.
Hmm.
But we, at that point, I had not read any of his work. It turns out we had met for 2 seconds once at a convention, and there was a picture of us right next to each other, but neither of us remembered it until I saw his face later. And I said, "Is that you? We met like 2 years ago." Um, the comics world is interesting like that. But I reviewed, it was called Splitsville, the miniseries, and it's very
Hmm.
clever.
Hmm.
I reviewed it favorably because I thought it was great, both the art and the actual story itself, and the humor and everything. And the concept was that there in this world is one superhero and one supervillain, and they're the same person, but they don't know it, but their sidekicks do, and they're profiting off of it. So it's called Splitsville because it's split personality, and I thought that was so much fun. I would love for him to do more, except we need to do more Underfoot first, Ben.
Yes,
No, I'm
yes.
I'm kidding, I'm kidding. But it was a really fun little series, and I loved it, and so I reviewed it, and I tweeted and I tagged him when the review came out, and he like normal people would be like, oh, thank you, and move on with their lives. Instead, he found through my Twitter bio the fact that I had a secondary account as my hamster, and at the time her name, sadly now deceased because they don't live forever, but her screen name was Bitty Miss Izzy because she was tiny little girl, and he started tweeting back to her as a hamster. And that's how we started talking, and then eventually, we were like, oh, this is really fun, this could be like a book, and then we kept talking, and 7 years later pitched a series to a number of publishers, including Lionforge, and that's how it came to be.
Love it, love
I
it.
was not setting out to write a comic. In fact, I still have a half finished novel that I'll get back to at some point. That's about World War II. So
Oh,
we'll get there.
nice.
We'll get there at some point, maybe.
Looking forward to that. Yeah. I love when people create across forms, prose, comics, picture books, whatever it happens to be. And you seem to be somebody who likes to write from different perspectives, tweeting as a hamster, answering letters as Deadpool. I love the range there.
Well, I think it's really good practice.
Hmm.
If you are seeking to be a writer, I think it's great practice to write in different voices to gain your own voice as well. I
Hmm.
mean,
Hmm.
also because writing in different voices can be its own thing. I did the Deadpool blog for at least 2 years before. What happened was Twitter became a big thing, and then I had the biggest Deadpool Twitter for a while. It was like 3,000 followers or something. And then the moment Marvel actually made one, that was the end of that. I was like, okay, I'm done now. I'm good. We don't need to compete with Marvel. But before that, Deadpool hadn't been as big for a while. He was big in the 90s, then he went away. I got into him in like 2008-ish and started doing the blog 2009, something. I forget exactly. But yeah, so like that was a great practice in writing. And obviously I'm not going to claim that I wrote in exact Deadpool voice. I had fun with it. I made up
Hmm.
entire scenarios where they all worked for Agency X, and Outlaw had a relationship with Thor, but we never said his name. He was just the whiny guy with the hair, the big muscle dude, like, and he was
Uh-huh.
always kind of chasing after her and like, why aren't you nicer to me?
Love
So
it.
so I made up stuff that wasn't obviously canon, and not really in the voice, but I had a lot of fun playing with it. And
Hmm.
while I don't have a lot of formal background in fiction writing, I have a ton of background in writing. I have a journalism degree, I have a law degree, among other things, and I wrote poetry from a young age, and actually was published in a few places with my poetry, won a couple of contests and things, and short fiction. But I don't have a ton of formal education in simply creative writing or writing comics. But I did take one class in college, and part of one of the assignments was to write a short story in the voice of like a famous short story writer. So that was really interesting uh practice for me to do. And trying to remember now who it was that I wrote. I'm sure I could find it if I looked hard enough. So yeah, I think it's great to write in these different voices, and that it helps develop your skills and it helps
Hmm.
develop your own voice or your own voices. It was great training for me to write as a journalist, as an attorney, as a comics character, as a poet. Like, you learn different things. Like, at some point there may be a song that shows up in the Underfoot, and certainly poetry is not that far from song lyrics. So I feel like
Hmm.
I can do it, whether whether we get to it. And or Ben, obviously we work together on all of these things, and he's got some ideas because he has a band, so he has written songs. So the two of us together are a great team because he has also great experiences, and he's written other comics like The Great Divide for Dynamite, and along with Splitsville, which I had reviewed, and some other Smuggling Spirits and Hex and Hammers are his other ones prior to the Underfoot, and then some Grumpy Cat, which is how he met Michelle and
Hmm.
suggested her as our artist. But yeah, so the two of us both have like experience in song and or poetry writing. All of that goes into both the actual skill and also your confidence in knowing, hey, I can do this. I can write a song, maybe.
Hmm. Hmm.
Or at least the lyrics to one. I'm not really a composer, but the lyrics, maybe Ben will compose the song.
And you also work with Tom Zoller, who has his own sort of thing in comics too, and multiple titles and pieces as well. A very talented person as well.
Yes, Tom is more traditionally trained in comics in the sense that he went to the Kuber school. And so
Mhm,
he
mhm,
got a full education in all the various things. So he can write and draw and letter and et cetera, put a whole book together. So it has been very valuable working with him to date on the lettering for the book. And I will say I was not knowledgeable about lettering to the extent that, like I wasn't totally sure of the actual digital process of some of it, and
mhm,
also like I needed to ask more questions than an experienced comics creator might about how far you want to go in differentiating this person's speech from this. Do we ever want to have like multiple at one point we considered multiple speech font formats, text formats for the different categories of animals. So in ours, the fur versus the scales versus the feathers, the different I guess they would be kind of the genii, the genuses of the different species and everything of our animals. So we
mhm,
had, we have like the hamsters and the badgers and things like that, and then we have like the lizards and the snakes and the turtles. But some of them actually cross over because it's not like just, it's not like one is always this, one's always that. And we decided that that would be too much to do and it would be too confusing. But it's interesting if you look like at something like Sandman and you look at the fonts and the word balloons and everything, it really does add to it if it works with your story. But those
mhm,
are like consistent characters that always have that kind of character to them because they're endless. They are the endless.
mhm,
So yeah, it's been very valuable working with him. He's got his own creator owned comics and also has worked on licensed comics, and so he's a powerhouse in his own right. And then came to letter our little hamster book
mhm.
or books.
Yes, yeah. There are two now, and
Yes. I
also,
will reach
oh
them
yeah.
out here because I've got what you can see a bookmark in one because these are my work copies. So these are the ones I use to refer back to what we've written, along with the digital copies, of course. But this is the first book in the series, The Underfoot, The Mighty Deep. And this is the second, The Underfoot Into the Sun, both covers by our wonderful artist, Michelle Wen, who does not only the art, but also the colors.
Mhm, mhm. And so it's marketed as sort of a all ages, middle grades, enjoyable for all is what I would say. So curious about, I think the official question on the list was something like, what do you want readers to take from it? But you're welcome to approach that however you would like.
Yeah, so I think most of us in the creating business know that the marketing aspects of it are sort of created by, publicists and everything like
Mhm,
that.
mhm, mhm,
They figure out where your work's going to fit. So we started building this with no kind of idea where it might end up in terms of that. But by the time we pitched it, obviously they thought, okay, we're going to slot it into this area. So it's a middle grade graphic novel, which is marketed to the 8 to 12s. I like to say like a strong reader 7 to 100 plus.
mhm,
And
mhm, mhm.
anybody who's about 7 or 8 and can really get to grips with the story all the way up to until you go into the next world, wherever that may be. Um, and one thing that really contributes to that for us is that there are 4 chapters in the book, but between each chapter, you get a little bit of science and history, and
Mhm.
and this is actually all fact. This is not fiction. This is the fact that goes into the fiction. And so, if you're a younger reader, you might read that, but there's a lot of high scientific terms in that. Like there are
Mhm.
like we talk about the mushrooms in the book, but we tell by their like scientific name as well as their colloquial name, and all of that stuff goes into what makes the book. So if you're an adult reader or an older child reader, maybe you're a teen or something, and you're learning, maybe you're in biology class, maybe you're in high school, you're in biology class, you might understand more the in between inserts into the book, which are all within story. It's like some of the long gone humans notes and communications that you get.
Mhm.
And if you're a younger reader, you might not fully understand that, but you don't need to read the story. So one thing that I like about that and Ben likes about that is that it's kind of adjustable to your reading level. It's like I grew up watching like Animaniacs. If you're a child,
Mhm.
you get some jokes. If you're an adult, you get other jokes and references. And our book is sort of the same. If you're a child, you can certainly follow the whole story through. But if you're an older child or an adult, you might also be like, oh, that was a real thing. Oh, that's interesting. Or what's the science behind how solar panels are being made thinner all the time? That comes up in our second book. And we're always looking for stuff like that and pulling it out to put into the story because it's so interesting. Because of that, and lots of science fiction writers have this happen, we have predicted a flood in DC. We predicted COVID. Sorry, guys. We predicted a volcanic eruption, not the one that we had said was going to happen, but still a volcanic eruption, and a version of murder hornets. So
Yep.
I have had people say to
Very
me,
prescient.
why don't you write into the next one that we all win the lottery? And I'm like, I will win the lottery in that book. That's what I will write in the backstory of a human who now appears in the book as well as writing it. It will be like, and she won the lottery, and then maybe I will. And Ben and Michelle will all win the lottery. Just
Love
split
it.
it amongst the whole team. But in terms of what I would like readers to take away from it, some of it is that educational thing. And I really never liked preachy education when I was a kid and I was reading my fun literature. Like, sure, if it's a textbook, that's what you're there for. But if you're there to have fun, the best way to learn is when your story is not interrupted by having to like stare at something for so long and understand it. If you can get it from context, etc., that's a really great way to learn. So what we and Ben feels the same way, so that what we write is, hopefully fun, but still somewhat educational, but educational because we think it's fun. The education we're putting in there is stuff that we think is super cool. So so I hope that readers do learn from it, both kids and adults. And I wanted to remember to mention that there are 2 free resources that go with the first book in the series that are useful in that sense. There's actually a teacher and parent guide that was done by a PhD in education that goes through the standards and has discussion questions about a lot of the stuff that we put in there that you wouldn't expect necessarily in a hamster book. We talk about essentially things that in regular life could be like classism and racism and things like that, and they come out differently, and like differences in religion and different things. Like you wouldn't expect to find that maybe in an animal book, but it's all there. And so there are some discussion questions where you can go through it with a child or something. And there's also an activity book that we put together during COVID, and that has a write your own adventure that Ben did, a science project that I wrote up that goes with the first book, and a bunch of pages that Michelle put together that she took her art and made it things like an activity, a coloring thing, a find object thing, found object thing. So those are both available for free on my website. If you just go click on the first book and it'll say like free downloadable PDF. So those are some great resources that teachers and parents might need to be aware of if they want to like kind of engage more with a kid on it. But really, I think that I hope readers come away with enjoyment, maybe some learning, wanting to read the next one because we're working on it. And hopefully some impact. We have had parents say that this or that part of it like meant a lot to their child. One parent wrote and said that I believe it was her 8-year-old son read about one of the characters, because we do have serious things like character death. And so she was thankful for it because it allowed her to launch a conversation with him about death. I mean, we didn't intend that, but we did not intend that. Like it's good that it has helped a parent to have a serious discussion with their child. We've also had people tell us that death broke them. We're sorry. But I mean, that's part of writing. We want people to be involved. We want them to feel. We want them to have the impact of the story really mean something to them, and to invest in our characters because we're invested in them. And there's a lot of real issues that we put into what our characters go through. I do think that I love anthropomorphic characters because if you are writing a character who is one removed from a human, they're not an actual human, you can sometimes talk about big issues in a way that if it was a human experience, the person might feel directly like attacked or threatened or worried by. But if it's about an animal, instead they may be able to more easily empathize with the situation. And, maybe, hopefully that changes someone's thinking if they're going in a direction that is not as kind to others or doesn't accept, the differences we have, and then they look at how that might affect these animal characters and they're invested in them. I mean, there's a whole lot of things that people take out of books. We can only
Oh
do
yeah.
what we can. We enjoy writing them. We put in the stuff we love. We put in our feelings. We put in, a lot of our thoughts on the world, and we put in questions. In the first after the first book came out, there was one review. They say don't read your reviews, but of course you look at least a few of them, including the bad ones. Sorry for
Hmm.
anyone who doesn't love our series, but there were lots of positive ones. But one that was positive, but also had a little negative, not negative, but like constructive feedback. They
Hmm.
said, I really wish that they had talked more about the subject of animal testing, because they really are looking at this in the first book from the perspective where the hamsters look at their special abilities that they got from animal testing as a gift. They revere the humans. They call them the giants that were, and they want them to come back. They think maybe they will someday, and they think of their special abilities as a positive.
Hmm.
And I read that review and I was like, that's fine, because in book two, sometimes you have to, if you're developing a whole series, you got to wait. In book two, we approach what the scales think of the whole thing, and they are not happy because while the
Hmm.
hamsters got the special abilities, the scales got irradiated.
Yeah.
So, and it was all part of animal testing, and it all builds into, in fact, in the second book, there's actually, this is my nerdy government lawyerness coming out. There's an actual organization chart that tells you
Hmm.
where
Hmm.
in the organization the scales versus the hamsters were, and you can see that they're two different branches of the experimental organization. So they weren't treated the same. So we do
Hmm.
actually bring up some really serious issues, but we don't always tell people how to feel about ones like that.
Hmm.
People should
Hmm.
think about it themselves. Maybe there are conflicting feelings, maybe sometimes it is helpful and maybe sometimes it's terrible, or maybe you feel just one way. But it's good to have different perspectives. It's not always, they say that it's not always the writer who's the character is not the writer and all of that. We're not always writing what we actually believe, but we do
Hmm.
want people to question.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you mentioned the educator's guide. So my last question that's on the list is about those places where people can connect. It's about what might be next in the creative journey, upcoming events, things of that nature.
Yeah, so we are working on the Underfoot 3. We do not have a release date at this time, but we have lots of great ideas. And sometimes when you get to that third plus book, there's so much going on that you have to tie together. We've all heard
Mhm.
of Chekhov's gun. If there's the gun on the wall, it has to go off by the third act, because it can't just be there for no reason. So we're working on making all of our Chekhov's guns go off in the right way, and in a way that potentially even leaves it open for more stories.
Mhm.
So we are working on that. I also have a couple of other projects I'm poking out in the background, but nothing goes anywhere until Underfoot 3 is done. Gosh darn it. But as for me, I will be at New York Comic Con, which is the October 12th to 15th weekend this year. I believe that's correct. And I'll be in Artist Alley at K34. If I'm wrong, just look it up, but I believe I'm in K34, which is basically like if you go in the front and go all the way back and not all the way back, but you'll find me. Um, and I'll be there all weekends with some very limited book ones. The book one is actually sold out, so we need to get on a reprint, hopefully, at some
Mhm.
point soon.
Mhm.
We don't know exactly when that's going to happen, but I have a whole 21 copies. So if people want that Underfoot one, come early, because that's all I got. I got plenty of Underfoot 2, and it is also available digitally. So if we run out, you can get it digitally. You can get it at libraries. I'm a big supporter of libraries, and I'm happy
Mhm.
for them to have our books. So there are different places to get them, but it's actually quite hard to find book one, the paper copy, online right now. And I've actually had to buy back some copies. So I have a few
Wow.
library copies for sale, actually, along with the new ones I was able to locate. But yeah, I also sell hamster ears. So like little hamster ears that people love, and I love, and I wear them at the cons, and I have some other fun things. But it's the books and some merchandise that goes along with them. And I'll be there all weekend, and I would love to see people there. And you can also find me on social media and my website. It's all the same. It's just the Emily ESSE, S is in Suzanne, either at the Emily ESSE or the EmilyESSE.com, or any of those iterations. I'm the same. I've tried to make it consistent everywhere. I could talk forever about stuff, but I'm very happy to have been here. And please check out the Underfoot. Please also check out the other work of Ben and Michelle and Tom, our wonderful team. And please come see me at New York.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much, Emily.
Thank you.